like. Note the green button is your option to mute yourself. You can also see a list of the attendees and type questions into the chat. So partway through the presentation, we'll take a break for questions, and then we'll have another opportunity for questions at the end of the presentation too. So either hold your questions for those times, and we will let people unmute themselves and ask them, or you can type them into the chat box, and then we'll answer them during the breaks too. So what we are hoping to accomplish through this webinar is to share with you a little bit of the work we've been doing the past couple years. This will include some background and rationale for this project, and will culminate with sharing the tools we've developed and hope you'll be able to use. So first, I'll do quick introductions. On this webinar today, you've got myself, Erin Buckwalter. I manage NOFA Vermont's Market Development and Community Food Access Programs. And later on, you'll hear from Abbie Nelson. She's the Vermont Feed Program Director and NOFA Vermont Ag Education Manager. So in case you aren't familiar with NOFA Vermont and Vermont Feed, I'll just share a little bit about what we are and what we do. So first, a little background on NOFA Vermont. NOFA Vermont is the Northeast Organic Farming Association of Vermont, and we're a nonprofit association of farmers, gardeners, and consumers that since 1971 have been working to grow local farms, healthy foods, and strong communities. So a cornerstone of our mission is to increase access to healthy, local, and organic foods for everyone. And we've identified that growth in local and regional food purchasing by Vermont institutions is a great extension of our organization's commitment to increasing access to good food for all people and growing market outlets for Vermont growers. So that's why we're doing this work. And then Vermont Feed stands for Vermont Food Education Every Day. And that's a statewide project that's a collaboration between NOFA Vermont and another Vermont nonprofit called Shelburne Farms. And this project started by working with schools and communities to grow robust farm-to-school programs. And since the project started in 2000, we've expanded to include other institutions other than schools, acknowledging that it's the same supply chain for all these institutions and that we need all institutions changing their purchasing in order to transform the food system. So kind of building some collective demand. So over the past decade, the state of Vermont has been widely recognized for its commitment to and excitement about local foods. We've seen interest and innovation leading to growth in local purchasing, but the Vermont Farm to Plate goal of doubling local purchasing by 2020 from 5 to 10% statewide still feels like a reach, especially within institutional settings sometimes. So through this project, we've been working to understand why this is and what kind of tools we can provide to make this goal more attainable for institutions. So through our work with Vermont Feed, particularly in farm to school, we've seen great success with growing demand for ultra-local purchases. And when we talk ultra-local, that means really purchases that are coming from the immediate geographic area of the institution. So these purchases tend to be ones where the institution and the producer have a direct relationship, and often, they might be in that institution's county or in their, region of the state. So while these ultra-local purchases are really exciting, we have seen a trend of many of these purchases staying pretty small volume and value. And so there's many reasons for this. One reason might be the size and product availability of the farms that are in that region. Another might be the number of direct relationships that an institution is able to administer or the number of vendors they're willing to manage. And another might just be the number, kind of the limited farmers in that geographic area that the institution's looking to purchase from. So we believe that really in order to scale up farm-to-institution sales, institutions need to look outside of these ultra-local purchases, and we're advocating that they develop a tiered buying approach. We believe that this will help them address some of these barriers and also help institutions play their part in helping meet these overall statewide farm-to-plate goals. In addition, we also believe and have seen in our work working with institutions that it's not just geography that institutions care about when they're buying local, but a whole host of other values that they associate with local. So that's where our values-based tiered buying approach comes in. So as we've been working on this project for a couple years, we realized that it would be really helpful to understand what literature already existed about institutional purchasing values, as well as lessons learned from other institutions that had developed tiered buying approaches. So we enlisted our frequent partners, David Connor and Florence Baycott at the University of Vermont, to work with us on this research. And the goals of our research were to explore how a values-based tiered buying approach could support the development of a local and regional institutional food buying program. So in this research, we looked at past studies and interviews and other academic research, and it gave us an overview of, first, definitions that institutions have used for local food and growth trends in local over recent years. Other values that institutions prioritize in their local procurement programs, including their motivations, their willingness to pay for different values, the benefits and barriers to local and regional procurement for food programs, and the differences between types of institutions and what they value. We also explored the capacity of Vermont and New England to feed themselves in order to understand potentials and limits for a greater amount of local regional food purchases. We looked at the potential benefits and challenges of regional sourcing, and we looked at other national organizations that are working towards increasing institutional local food procurement and how they're doing it. So we, in working with them, came out with a great paper. It's available to you on our website, and we'll have that website link up at the end of the presentation. So that paper, if you want to read a little bit more in detail, you're welcome to, but we'll just provide a little overview here in the next few slides. So central to this local purchasing movement is the question of how institutions are using the word local. So what we've seen is that there isn't just one definition. When we started this project, we were primarily focused on geography. But as we got further into it, we realized that institutions have several motivations for buying local. Through our work and our review of research that has been conducted over the last 15 years or so, the overwhelming motivators for institutions to buy local are related to supporting the local economy, of course, and supporting local farmers and enhancing their farm viability. Also procuring higher quality and healthier foods, meeting their customers' demand for local foods in the institutional meals, and also having higher sales or participation rates for their food programs. So what we've seen is that institutions use local as a proxy for specific attributes or values, but they don't always have anything to do with the products being local. So, many of the institutions we work with might think that local means that the food is grown more sustainably, or that it has a lower carbon footprint, that it's organic, or that it's more fresh, etc. In Vermont, the state definition of local is Vermont plus 30 miles from the borders, and that has a very different meaning here than local in Texas does, where a farm might be 200 or 300 miles away. So, just to put this in context, because of the small scale of Vermont, we see that there's more opportunity for transparently communicating these different values associated with local because of the relationships institutions often have with the farms they're purchasing from. So we see many institutions that either go out and visit a farm and they've seen the production practices firsthand, or they trust because they have a relationship with the producer, or they know someone who has a relationship with the producer. We've also learned that values differ across institutional types. So, for example, we see in schools and hospitals that they more strongly value antibiotic-free and used with low amounts of pesticides. Motivations for purchasing products that are produced humanely and are fair trade appear more strongly in the university setting, and universities also tend to be more responsive to consumer demand than other institutions, while K-12 schools have generally less flexibility due to extreme budget constraints. So in Vermont, transparency is why we've seen a lot of success, I think, so far in these ultra-local direct relationships, because it's easier to know the values that the producer has when you have that relationship. And when we're advocating for institutions beyond these direct relationships to grow their purchasing, we acknowledge that with these wholesale purchases, it's definitely harder for institutions to know those producers' values, and therefore if the products meet their own values. So therefore, we propose that institutions, in order for them to better grow their local purchasing, they need to articulate their values so they can prioritize them better when buying outside of these direct relationships. So our research also looked at ways that regional purchasing could augment local purchasing, tackling the question of why is regional purchasing important and can it be beneficial for institutions to purchase outside Vermont. So in Vermont, for example, there have been several different analyses to try and understand what percentage of food needed to sustain Vermonters could actually be grown in Vermont. So while the exact percentage differs, some by researchers, the research is clear that Vermont produces enough fruits and dairy to meet dietary guidelines for Vermonters, but not enough vegetables and proteins. In a 2013 study by David Connor and other researchers at the University of Vermont, they concluded that different states have different strengths, land characteristics, and infrastructures, and that it's therefore not realistic to produce the full diet needed by people within each state, given current market realities and consumer preferences. And so therefore, collaboration across the region can allow for a more localized and varied diet while playing on each state's strengths. So I'm hearing a little bit more feedback. If anyone is not muted, please make sure you're muted. So as you can see on this slide, the research suggests that regional sourcing complements local for a variety of reasons. There's resiliency. So for example, if there was a natural disaster, be a lot more easy. There's also farm viability, farmland preservation. There's greater diversity and transparency of values-based production when we're looking across the region and potentially just in the state. Variety of products available and season extension is definitely a way that it helps with the local issue. But then we also see that there are reasons that might not make regional purchasing as desirable for institutions that are interested in local. So getting a product from the farm down the road supports the local economy more than getting one from out of the area. Local product might be made, more fresh, and if connecting with the farm is really important to your institution's program, the closer in geographic proximity, the better for that. So as you can see from this slide, we've broken down our tiered buying approach into 3 tiers. So ultra-local, as we discussed, is the immediate geographic area of the institution. So for example, that could be a county. Local in Vermont is defined as produced in Vermont or within 30 miles from the state's borders. And for the purpose of this discussion, regional is New York and New England, but could also include Quebec or other neighboring areas. So as you'll see in the next part of our presentation, we've combined the tiers and the values to create a values-based tiered buying system as one way to help institutions clarify their values and goals around their procurement and hopefully develop new systems to grow their local and regional procurement. So as for values-based tiered buying, I know that that's totally a mouthful and we're taking suggestions for new names. If anyone can think of one, you can let us know offline. But right now, that's really doing the job to explain, what we're trying to accomplish while we're working with institutions. So, we're going to take a short break right now before we move on to the describing the tools we've created. And Abbie Nelson is going to share that part. So at this point, if you have a question, you can unmute yourself. Or if you don't have questions, please keep yourself muted. You also have the option of typing questions into your chat box. And I just want to share with Erica or Abbie that I don't have, I'm not seeing questions. So if there are questions that are being typed in, please just share them with me. So we'll give a minute or two and people can jump in with questions if you've got any so far on kind of the background of why we've been doing this work or the research that we did. Anyone? Okay.
Erin?
What seems? Oh yeah. Go ahead.
Wait, hold on. Erin, can you hear me?
I can.
Good.
Okay. You ready?
We've got not quite. I'm seeing we've gotten one person saying thanks for the presentation. That was typed in.
Sure.
I guess you done. Oh, here we go. I'd love to ask if you have found any information about what local is defined as across other regions or countries even.
Yeah, we have a little bit of information in that in our paper, and some states have a definition. The USDA uses 400 miles from a location. Some states say within their borders, and each institution that we work with, we see a lot of variation. So the answer is there's lots of definitions and no consistent standard, which makes it tricky. But we think, Abbie will share more later, but we really think that using these tools that we've developed can help institutions communicate the values and the definitions that are important to them. So then they can make when they're looking for purchases, they can easily tell their farmer or their distributor, this is our parameters of where we want to prioritize, and then it's easier for them to get what they want because they're letting people know what they want. Any other questions?
I'm not
seeing any more pop up, Abbie?
Here's another one. Was this research targeted towards Vermont institutions only?
No, this research was not. We did some research a couple years ago where we surveyed Vermont institutions back in, I think, 2012. But this research was really looking at academic literature and other institutions around the country. So, for example, we looked at Yale, who has had a tiered buying approach in the past, and other institutions like that. But then a lot of just the peer-reviewed academic literature that exists about work that's been done with institutions and what their values are. So there hasn't been a ton of work around kind of motivators and those types of issues specifically with Vermont institutions, and so that's why we looked more broadly.
Mm-hmm. And all the references are in the research paper that David Connor and Florence Vico prepared for us.
Yep. Yeah, it's a great resource that even the citations gives an idea of some places where if you're interested in a specific topic, you could explore a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Well, so I think we should move on. Abbie, I'm going to turn this over to you and put myself on mute. And I think Erica's going to make you the presenter. And we'll open it back up at the end for questions. So if you have more questions then, I'm happy to answer them, or Abbie will be around to answer them too. Okay, thanks, Abbie.
Okay. Stephanie or Erica, what am I doing? I need, am I on?
You're
Can
on.
people see my
your screen? So bring up
good.
PowerPoint.
You see my PowerPoint? I see my PowerPoint. Do you see my PowerPoint?
No.
No.
I don't see it either, Abbie.
How about now?
Yes.
You see the PowerPoint?
We do.
Oh, good. That's good news. Okay, so based on the research and our work here in Vermont, we created some tools that we're going to discuss right now. And it's all based on the concept of values-based tiered buying. And to enable institutions to articulate the values of the customers, community, and food nutrition program staff, we've created this purchasing plan. This is a systematic approach to procurement that will help institutions identify the values of their purchasing programs, set goals and commitments to grow these programs, and market their programs to build greater consumer awareness. If institutions develop transparent systems that clearly articulate values, goals, and commitments, the wholesale and institutional market for growers and producers will be able to respond to the increased demand. So we intend to briefly walk you through the use of this tool. So first, in order to be confident about the value statement for an institution that an institution has regarding its food program, it's important to research the values of the key stakeholder groups. As you can see, we targeted 3 key stakeholder groups: food nutrition program, community, where the institution is located, and the customer that the institution serves. So here's some examples of values that were expressed by a public school. And you can see that the values expressed go beyond geographic location of sourced food. And this makes sense based on the research we described earlier. So to this particular school, the community values homemade and great tasting foods, customers value convenience, and the nutrition program values fresh foods. And the challenge is to meld all these values into a rather simple statement that can be advertised and easily repeated. To include some of these values into a value statement can help ensure that all the different stakeholder groups buy into the food nutrition program. In addition, the value statement gives institutions an opportunity to express values that are not just about getting the lowest priced food. While institutions always have to consider price, this tool helps them balance their values-based decisions with their price-based decisions. This slide highlights the intersection of values and price. From the values identified, a statement can be created that is the basis for purchasing decisions. For this example, it is fresh and homemade local food at an affordable price. This value statement can then be the core of your food nutrition program marketing. Before we can get into the marketing, however, the second part of developing a values-based purchasing plan, and we are still waiting for one of you to think of a catchier name, we have an outline to consider program limits and challenges and logistics, which will dictate how you express your values in the foods bought and prepared. So examples might be place and time of service, customer time constraints, staff skills, equipment, food sources and contracts, storage space for fresh or frozen foods, or how the food might be used, such as in a salad bar differs from a grab-and-go meal. All these will determine what can be purchased and how the food will be served. No matter what the constraints an institution has, it is most useful to be realistic and clear about these because they may dictate what farms, suppliers, and foods an institution can use. So we believe that a commitment to buy local or regional food is based on the values expressed in the food or nutrition program's constraints and logistics. In the end, it's up to your program to define the values and tiers that matter most to you. Ultra-local might mean your town or county, and most likely this tier will involve direct sales. Would a second tier be your state, or that's sourced through a local distributor or food hub? How about looking beyond your state into the region, and the region produces a lot of good food, and it's identifiable. And just as a side note, in our experience, it's interesting to consider how certain products from a region may take on a desirable reputation. For example, many people in Vermont have a desirable reaction to Maine blueberries, but they're not so likely to value Maine carrots in the same way, primarily because Vermont grows a lot of carrots. So that's something to take into consideration as well. Committing to a tiered buying structure is very possible. Perhaps you prioritize your county or state first, and it can expand to your region, which can complement the other tiers and your values-based tiered buying system. For example, buying colorful local heirloom tomatoes for a salad bar and buying less expensive, great-tasting regional tomatoes for the sandwich line. The goal with the commitments is to be clear but reasonable and to express what you truly can commit to and will purchase over time. In addition, the commitments can be reviewed periodically to make sure they continue to align with the institution's values and what is available. So for instance, in this example, the ultra-local or from community is Happy Apple Orchard in our county for the fall because it's a smaller orchard. And then from the Vermont tier, 10% of Vermont vegetables we purchased and the wider spectrum of Vermont apples for winter and spring. And then for dairy, hormone-free New England dairy, and that product would be available year-round and is the regional commitment. You can see that this doesn't have to be complicated, and it can be as detailed as you need it to be. So here's a poster we created to market, finally to the marketing. And the values-based tiered buying can be shared basically with the world. We have made different posters in different sizes, some specific for Vermont and some for any state in the country. And these are fillable forms if you have Adobe Reader, so that you can actually type it or print it and write it, whatever you want to do. And you can see this example is from a regional medical center. This poster allows one to get away from having to label every local food on a menu or sign with the name of a farm, unless, of course, it's beneficial to highlight a direct ultra-local relationship. So we've presented quite a bit of information, both research and the tools that we created based on the research and our experiences. And luckily, both those will be available on the NOFA Vermont Farm to Institution webpage. Right now, you can unmute yourself and ask any questions. And again, you also have the ability to type in any of your questions. Okay, and I'm seeing one question. Is there evidence that when the values behind their purchasing are made more explicit that institutions actually change their buying behavior? And that's a great question. We are working on that. We are spreading the word and doing individual and small group trainings around this. And we're finding just in terms of figuring out the value statement that food service directors, and I've done it in a couple of schools, or I've seen the results in a couple of schools and also in a medical center, that it coalesces the committee and the people who are working on the wanting their institution to buy local. And it's really helping them focus on what's most important. So I would say it's successful, but we don't have a lot of evidence yet. So that's that.
Yeah, I would add that, you know, these are relatively new tools, and we are implementing them around the state. Some when we're going out one-on-one to institutions, and others where our partners are doing that work with institutions. And one of the things that we're doing this year is starting to collect some of the data tracking, especially with some schools. So we're hoping that we're going to see over time change, definitely. And that's our hope, but we haven't had multiple years to be able to compare before they use these tools to after they use these tools yet.
Did we answer the question about creating a digital version of this so that the data could be used to share and get some helpful statistics? And does that mean of the webinar or of the research? Or did Erin just answer the question about the use of tools? Okay, and Erin answered it. Thanks. So, any other questions, either typed in or verbal, that people have? Not seeing any questions. Okay, so what you've all been waiting for is the link to the research and resources and tools. We want to thank the John Merck Foundation and Vermont Community Foundation's Farm Initiatives and Forrest and Francis Blattner Foundation for the support of our research and our work and development of these tools, and to allow us to basically run around the state and see if we can't implement these tools to make a difference in the food system. And we're hoping that people outside of the state find these useful when they're working with institutions, or that institutions themselves will. And yes, I'm getting a message about that we'll continue to visit locations and have these conversations with institutions. Yes, we're doing it weekly. Myself or Erin, or also Amy Gifford from Vermont Feed, we are meeting basically weekly with different food service directors. And we have regional partners, at least in Vermont, and we also have the Farm to Institution New England network, as well as the Farm to School network, to spread the word. Erin, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to say, our goal is with this webinar and with these tools is not to say that you have to use these tools the way that we've created them, but that based on some research, we think that these are some tools that could get us towards creating more robust local and regional purchasing programs at institutions. And so if the tools that we created don't work totally for you and you want to tweak them and they're going to work better for you in a different way, that's totally fine. Like, this is just the starting place, and we're really excited that we've had the opportunity to do this work, and we're going to continue refining these tools as we're working one-on-one with institutions and hearing questions that are helping us think like, oh, well, maybe if we add another column and ask this question, it will actually help them frame it this way, or and we're trying to develop more marketing tools because we find that a lot of institutions are doing really great work already and they're just not sharing it as well as they could, and people don't know. So how do we help them share it and then also challenge them to do more? And so that said, please use this and let us know if you use it. Let us know if it's useful. Let us know if you think that there are ways that we could tweak it and make it stronger. We're definitely up for continuing to build the resources that we have available and making them bigger and better.
So, Erin, just another question proposed to all about the, in terms of schools that are part of the the USDA school nutrition program, and if buying direct, if there has to be a solicitation for bids. And the answer is yes, if your purchases are over $3,000. If they're under $3,000, there's less bidding required, but there still is some documentation, and I'd be happy to answer those questions. You can call or email me directly.
And about that bidding process, we kind of, as that bidding process became more clear that it was going to be audited and followed up on, we were developing these tools, and we had talked to a lot of schools that were really anxious about how this was going to affect their ability to purchase local and regional. And we think that these tools, and by actually really clearly defining your values, actually help schools be able to craft bids that are more clear so that they actually get what they want. So you obviously can't craft a bid that only lets the farm down the road bid on it. But to be able to say, our food program values fresh, it values the educational tie that we have with, it values the field trip, it values whatever your values are, and you can build that into the parameters of how you're going to judge that bid to make it more likely that you're going to be able to get the food that you want. So this clarity, we think, really helps with that USDA bid process as well.
That's great. Thanks, Erin. So finally, we just want to let you all know, as everybody knows, with grants and funding, we have to show impact. So we will be sending you all a short survey in a couple of weeks to find out if you have used these tools or found them valuable. So that'll be our next contact with you. And of course, you can call or email us to get more information or talk through your situation with us. Okay, I think that's the end of our show. Whoops, that didn't help. Please contact us if you have any more questions or concerns, and thanks for everything.